The charge of the Light Brigade. Say the name, and you instantly conjure an image of glorious, doomed stupidity. 600 men riding into the jaws of cannon fire because someone scribbled a note poorly. But before we get to that specific, magnificent failure of operational competence, we must ask, what divine cause? What divine necessary cause triggered such an international tragedy? A deep-seated hunger for warm water ports? No, the inevitable clash of ideologies. Not quite. The truth, stripped of its geopolitical grandeur, is pathetic. The Crimean War began because two extremely powerful men, Tsar Nicholas I of Russia and Emperor Napoleon III, they reached a mutual, unshakable conclusion. The other one had absolutely terrible taste in interior design, especially when it came to eastern mass seating and central heating, the epicenter of this looming cataclysm. The epicenter was Jerusalem, specifically the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. This ancient structure packed to the rafters with history and sanctity, was also crammed wall to wall with highly territorial sects, all fighting over the prime spiritual real estate. Imagine a truly dysfunctional family Thanksgiving dinner. Instead of fighting over the gravy boat, they were fighting over who controlled the ladder leading to the altar. For decades, the Orthodox Church, backed by the mighty Russian Empire, had enjoyed what they considered the keys. These keys did not just unlock doors. They symbolized control over vital spiritual infrastructure and lamps. They controlled which lamps were lit, which relics were dusted, and most importantly, given the chill stone halls. Who had the authority to control the rudimentary central heating system? But by the 1850s, the French decided. Under the leadership of a new, insecure, and theatrically ambitious emperor, they decided this was unacceptable. Scene 1. The Pew Wars. In the vast echoing halls of the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg, Tsar Nicholas I stood. He was a man perfectly constructed for the 19th century, towering, ramrod straight, and boasting a tightly coiled sense of personal and spiritual entitlement. He viewed the world not as a complex web of nations, but as a vast, slightly ill-organized empire that only needed his iron hand. It needed his iron hand, an impeccable sense of orthodoxy, to achieve perfect military political symmetry. One gloomy February afternoon, a courier arrived bearing dispatches from the Levant. The Tsar was currently attempting to reorganize his entire collection of military boots by size, color, and date of manufacture. He paused his fastidious task and barked what news from Jerusalem general, his voice accustomed to cutting. His voice was accustomed to cutting through parade ground wind. The general cleared his throat nervously. Your Majesty, it concerns the rights of the Orthodox Christians in the Holy Land, specifically the seating arrangements for the upcoming Easter ceremonies. Nicholas I blinked, asking, "Are we talking about pews? I trust they are facing the east, according to sacred tradition, and not angled awkwardly towards some window." Yes, Your Majesty. But the primary issue is the French. They have recently demanded that the Ottoman Sultan, they demand Abdul Majid. I may Allah grant him mild indigestion. Grant the keys to the Church of the Nativity. By extension, they want sole control over all Catholic rites. The Tsar's face, usually set in a stern mask, reddened. Set in the stern mask of a man forever disappointed by the mediocrity of others, his face began to redden. The keys. The French demand. The keys, yes, Your Majesty. This implies, crucially, that the Catholic priests would determine the schedules, the lighting, and according to the recent complaint from our archimandrite, they intend to turn the thermostat settings up to an alarmingly high degree during the liturgy. This was it. This was for Nicholas, the ultimate affront. Control over the thermostat was control over everything spiritual. It was the subtle difference between spiritual rigor and decadent, swampy comfort he was convinced the French, especially under the rule of Napoleon III, a man Nicholas publicly dismissed as a parvenu and political adventurer. He believed they were trying to introduce revolutionary liberal drafts into his sacred spaces, that upstart. Nicholas spat, referring to Napoleon III, never missing an opportunity to remind everyone that the new emperor, he only had the family name, not the family genius. He dares challenge me over the sanctity of the holy fire, only to demand better heat in the building. It is a vulgar power grab disguised as spiritual wellness, he said. Nicholas, I knew exactly why Napoleon III was doing this. The Emperor of the French, haunted by the ghost of his legendary uncle, he needed to look powerful. And what better way to project strength? Project strength in the Middle East by making sure his co-religionists did not catch a chill during their sermon. Prepare a dispatch immediately, Nicholas commanded, his mind already racing, plotting a countermove to humiliate. We will send an envoy, a man who understands the gravity of this interior conflict. Someone whose very presence screams, Russia means business, and our business includes perfectly calibrated heat. That man was Prince Menshikov, a distinguished diplomat known for his extreme brusqueness and diplomatic style. His style relied primarily on glaring until the opponent wilted. Menshikov's mission was clear. Storm Constantinople. Inform the unfortunate Sultan that Russia was personally offended by the notion of warm pews and the Orthodox. The Orthodox Church would immediately resume control over the spiritual thermostat and all associated keys. Scene 2. The Sultan's perpetual headache. Across the Black Sea, in the magnificent but perpetually stressed Topkapi Palace, Sultan Abdul Majid I was having a terrible decade. He presided over the declining Ottoman Empire, traditionally nicknamed the sick man of Europe. The Sultan sighed. The Sultan, however, preferred the moniker the exhausted man of the Levant, perpetually caught between powers. Today he was fielding a complaint about the price of Turkish delight and simultaneously sweating over a decree. So the French emperor insists that the Catholic Church must have sole eternal authority over the keys. His Grand Vizier, a man whose tenure was measured by how many times he had appeased European diplomats, nodded. Yes, Your Majesty. Napoleon III sent a rather insistent note mentioning the unacceptable draftiness in the grotto. It demands improved lighting for the reading of the Gospel. Eternal authority, the Sultan muttered darkly. In this age, eternal means approximately, until the next great power sends a larger ship or yells louder. The Sultan knew France was merely using the Holy Land as a convenient chessboard Napoleon III had just recently. He had just recently pulled off a coup and needed to burnish his credentials as a legitimate European monarch. What better way than by declaring himself the global protector of Catholics, sticking a pin in the Tsar's balloon? Against the potential might of France, Abdul Majid made the calculated temporary decision and issued the decree. The Catholics got the keys. The French were placated for 3 days. Peace reigned, albeit a peace built on heat. Then came Prince Menshikov. He did not arrive subtly. He arrived like a winter storm front, draped in furs. He swept into Constantinople with an entourage that seemed specifically chosen to look intimidatingly robust. His first audience with the Sultan was less a diplomatic negotiation and more an elaborate staring contest. Your Majesty, Menshikov boomed, skipping all introductory pleasantries the Tsar wishes me to express. Offense, his profound offense at your recent decree regarding the keys. This is not about the pews, mind you, but respect. If I may be so frank, The thermostat settings established by the Orthodox are traditional and frankly superior. The Sultan, exhausted by the mere sight of Menshikov's impressive beard, tried to explain the complexities. But Prince the French threatened Menshikov, cut him off, leaning forward so that his face filled the vision, threatened to install stained glass windows in colors we find distasteful, to serve substandard wine. Tsar Nicholas I is the protector of 11 million Orthodox Christians within your borders. Do you wish him to think you prefer the Baroque? The psychological warfare was effective. Menshikov suggested with menace that if the Sultan did not immediately retract the French decree, Russia might invade. Russia might have to reconsider the sanctity of the Ottoman borders and invade your Balkan provinces. The subtle message: you let the French dictate the temperature in Palestine, and we will invade your provinces. The Sultan caved. He could not afford an argument with Russia over the appropriate level of ecclesiastical dampness. He promptly flip-flopped, issuing a new decree restoring the keys and the thermostat control to the Orthodox. Eternal, he sighed to his vizier, waving a dismissive hand at the discarded French document. Apparently eternal. Apparently eternal means less than one work week. Scene 3. The Auditory assault. On Sinope, news traveled. News of the Sultan's reversal traveled slowly but surely back to Paris, where Napoleon III was engaged in art. He was engaged in the high art of redecorating his private apartments to look slightly more like his uncle's. When he received the official confirmation that the Orthodox were once again in charge of the humidity levels, he threw a tantrum worthy of the Louvre. He dares, that reactionary peasant. Nicholas dares to undermine me. Undermine my status as the protector of the true faith. Napoleon III paced his ornate office, stopping to look. Stopping every few steps to check his reflection in a mirror. This is not about the church. This is about reputation. His foreign minister, a perpetually bewildered man named M. Drouin de Louis, attempted to soothe him. Your Majesty, perhaps we should send a diplomatic letter, carefully worded, appealing to their sense of cooperation. Number. Diplomacy has failed, Napoleon III declared, snapping his gloves when someone attempts to publicly steal keys. When someone steals your spiritual remote control, you must retaliate dramatically. What did the Russians send? A diplomat with a large beard, you say? Yes, Prince Menshikov. Fine. We shall send something larger and louder. We shall send something infinitely more irritating. Prepare the Charlemagne. Send her to the Black Sea. But wait, she is not to fire a single shot, not yet. M. Drouin de Louis tilted his head. If she is not to fire, what is she? What is her mission? Napoleon III's eyes gleamed with theatrical mischief. She is to perform an auditory assault. I want her anchored directly outside the Sultan's bedroom window in Sinope. And she is to play loud music. She is to play at maximum volume French naval marching tunes, specifically the ones with a lot of frantic oboe. She is to blast highly annoying sea shanties from dusk till dawn, mixed with periodic, very enthusiastic readings. They must be loud enough to rattle the porcelain, and irritating enough to drive a man to question his policy. The Sultan must understand that if he cannot grant us the keys, he shall at least grant us the right to ruin sleep. And so the French battleship, Charlemagne, the latest symbol of French naval modernity, set sail. Not as a harbinger of war, but as the world's first geopolitical noise complaint, when the Charlemagne arrived. Arriving off the coast near Sinope and beginning its nightly performance, Sultan Abdul Majid I immediately knew. He realized he had severely underestimated Napoleon III's capacity for petty vengeance. The first night was okay. The first night was tolerable, a novelty. But by the third night, after hours of listening to a shrill rendition of Marche Funèbre de la Grande Armée, played at a tempo wildly inappropriate for a funeral. The Sultan was a wreck. He was jumpy, irritable, and craving silence above all else. His vizier reported the crew. The French crew seemed to be taking requests, and were now attempting to incorporate bagpipes into the songs. The diplomatic pressure, combined with the extreme sleep deprivation, was too much when the ambassador came. When the French ambassador approached the palace again, carrying a fresh, aggressively polite note demanding keys, demanding the permanent resolution of the key dispute, the Sultan surrendered instantly. Yes, yes, give them keys. Give them the keys. Give them the church. Give them the whole of Palestine, if they will only make that drumming stop. Abdul Majid cried, clutching his ears. And so the Sultan, for the second time, declared eternal respect for Catholics. Scene 4. The game of geopolitical chicken. The geopolitical status was now perfectly balanced on a knife edge. Balanced on a knife edge of theatrical absurdity. France had successfully deployed passive-aggressive music, deployed musical warfare to gain temporary control of a Middle Eastern thermostat. Russia, having had the keys snatched back via sound pollution, was incandescent. In St. Petersburg, Tsar Nicholas I viewed the Charlemagne's presence not as a military threat, but as an intolerable invasion of privacy. It was a profound lack of respect for Russian culture. They used oboe music. Nicholas paced aghast. This is not diplomacy. This is a deliberate attempt to cause sonic unrest. This proves they are not merely interested in warm pews. They wish to incite global dissonance. He convened an emergency session. The tension was palpable. The Tsar was no longer rational. He was operating purely on the wounded ego of a man who believed himself divinely appointed to arbitrate all matters of taste, faith, and military footwear, only to be undercut by a loud, ill-timed sea shanty. We cannot allow this upstart to believe he can simply blast music and change treaties. Nicholas announced, if the Sultan will not hold the line, we shall move the line. The initial goal, securing the keys, had now morphed, as all good geopolitical spats do. It morphed into a matter of national honor, since Napoleon III had challenged Nicholas to a game of chicken. Nicholas decided to hit back where it mattered. The soft underbelly of the Ottoman Empire. In May of 1853, two Russian armies crossed the Prut River and invaded the Ottoman provinces of Moldavia and Wallachia. The official Russian justification was convoluted, referring to the protection of Orthodox subjects and rights. The unofficial reason was simpler. Nicholas was furious about the oboes the Ottoman Empire having just recovered from its musical headache. The empire was left with no choice if they allowed Russia. If they allowed Russia to occupy the Balkan provinces, their empire was finished, with the tacit encouragement. With the encouragement of Britain, who was deeply worried about Russian expansion, but still hoping for peace. And the newly aggressive France, Sultan Abdul Majid I, declared war on Russia in October 1853. Scene 5. Vienna. The Vienna Coffee House Peace Proposal. The initial fighting in the Balkans was exactly what one would expect. Expect from a war started over a thermostat. It was frustrating, inconclusive, and characterized by confusion. The Russians, under General Omar Pasha, were locked in a frustrating stalemate along the Danube. Tsar Nicholas, waiting desperately for his long-term ally Austria to step in and applaud his defense of Orthodox interior design. He found the Austrians instead taking a position of dubious neutrality. The Austrians, being masters of inertia, they decided the only sane way to handle a war started over church keys was to host an incredibly important talk. host an incredibly important conference in Vienna. Representatives from Britain, France, Prussia, and Austria met. They met in a highly prestigious coffee house to draft a treaty to end the war, while these very important talks, presumably fueled by copious amounts of caffeine and tiny crustless sandwiches, were ongoing. The fighting took. The actual fighting took a genuinely tragic, if somewhat predictable, turn on the Black Sea Russian warships. Russian warships chanced upon an Ottoman fleet near the port of Sinope, a port now indelibly associated with music, associated with the trauma of loud French brass music. The Russians, seizing a genuine military opportunity, they decided to disrupt the Ottoman supply lines. What followed was the Battle of Sinope. It was horrific. The Russians deployed the first ever explosive shells in naval combat. The results against the old wooden hulls. The results against the wooden hulls of the Ottoman ships were, to put it mildly, spectacular. The fleet was sunk. The Ottoman fleet was completely devastated, sunk, blown apart, and over 3,000 men were lost that day. This single, brutal military engagement, a complete pivot from the previous theatrical squabbles, properly terrified.
I regret that we cannot find
Right,
common
declared
ground
the diplomats in
until
Vienna,
such time as
finally
reason
tearing
prevails.
themselves away
This
from their
conference is
perfectly
adjourned.
brewed lattes. We must finalize this treaty immediately. This is turning into a proper war, and we cannot have that. They rushed a proposed peace treaty to the combatants. Tsar Nicholas, seeing the opportunity for an easy exit, an easy, ego-boosting exit after the Sinope victory, was actually willing to accept the terms, but the Sultan, the exhausted, tormented Sultan Abdul Majid I, still stinging from the loss of his fleet and the sheer condescension. He objected. He felt the treaty did not go far enough to secure his empire against future interference in design. Interference in his interior decorating or his sleep schedule. Diplomacy collapsed instantly. Scene 6. Unmasking. The unmasking of incompetence. The destruction at Sinope, a display of raw Russian power, alarmed Britain. It alarmed Britain and France far more than the initial invasion of Moldavia, the initial squabble over keys. The squabble over church heating had successfully metastasized into a full-blown existential crisis of power. In February 1854, Britain and France issued an ultimatum to Russia: withdraw from the Balkans, or we join the war. Nicholas, stubborn, arrogant, and convinced that European liberals were merely trying to deny him his temperature, he refused in March 1854. True to their word, Britain and France declared war on Russia. The resulting conflict, the Crimean War, would soon become synonymous not with high strategy or noble causes, but with sheer incompetence. It was a war that quickly transcended its absurd origin and became a vast, sprawling monument to logistical failure. By July, realizing he was diplomatically isolated, Nicholas grudgingly withdrew his forces from the Balkans. The original absurd cause for the war, the invasion of the principalities to enforce liturgical authority, was over. The war could have ended right there. The status quo was largely restored, but Britain and France, now committed and whipped into a pro-war frenzy by a public eager for action, were not finished. They needed a decisive victory to punish Russian pride and guarantee the future security of European seating. They decided to launch a full invasion of the Crimean Peninsula, specifically targeting the Russian naval base. Targeting the base at Sevastopol, their goal was to permanently destroy Russia's Black Sea power and ensure that future religious disputes could be settled without the aid of loud oboe music. It was a bold operation. It was a bold, highly complex operation that required massive logistical planning and professional execution. What they got instead was chaos. The Allied forces landed north of Sevastopol in September. The landing was messy. In the words of one British officer, it was like watching 100 theatrical managers try to put on a play. Try to put on a play using only one cart and actors who have forgotten their lines. There was no equipment. No equipment for unloading cargo. Soldiers had to borrow carts from local Tartar farms. There were no tents. Supplies were non-existent. Within days, the invading force, the flower of European military power, was sleeping outdoors, shivering, suffering from heat stroke, and promptly succumbing to cholera and dysentery. They were quite literally defeated by their own organizational skills before they had even sighted a Russian. This, then, was the true start of the Crimean War, a conflict that began with an argument over a thermostat. It escalated via sea shanty and was now being waged by armies that could not even manage to pack a spare blanket. The stage was set for the spectacular fiascos to come in 4 days, having finally assembled their gear. Having finally managed to find some lukewarm, contaminated water, the Allied army set out for Sevastopol. On the road, they met the Russians, entrenched on a steep hill overlooking the Alma River. The coming clash. It would reveal the bravery of the individual soldiers, the surprising tenacity of the Ottomans, and the leadership. The utterly confusing leadership that would define this war. But that was for tomorrow. Tonight, the sun set. Tonight, as the sun set over the Crimean steppe, the commanders prepared their vague, shouted orders, unaware that within weeks they would be responsible for sending 600 brave men straight into the wrong valley, directly at the line of cannons. All because Napoleon III could not tolerate the idea of Nicholas I having a better view of the altar than he himself did.